What if the most sought-after secret in human history was never lost, but deliberately hidden beneath the very place where heaven was believed to touch the earth? Imagine standing in the silence of Jerusalem before dawn. The city still sleeps. Above you rises a plateau of ancient stone, worn smooth by thousands of years of prayer, conquest, and memory. To most people, it is merely sacred ground. But beneath your feet lies a question that has haunted kings, priests, conquerors, archaeologists, and scholars for nearly 3 millennia. Somewhere below this mountain, according to centuries of tradition, there may be sealed chambers, forgotten passageways, and secrets buried so deeply that entire civilizations have risen and fallen without uncovering them. The deeper we look into the historical record, the stranger the mystery becomes. Empires destroyed the temple. Armies searched its ruins. Pilgrims crossed continents to stand where it once stood. Yet the object at the center of the story vanished without a trace. No definitive record. No confirmed discovery. Only silence. And silence, in history, is often where the most fascinating investigations begin. But before we ask what may lie beneath Solomon's temple, we must confront a more fundamental question. Why did so many generations become convinced that something was hidden there in the first place? Was it a lost relic? A sacred archive? A hidden chamber protecting ancient knowledge? Or are we dealing with something even more elusive, an idea so powerful that it survived long after the stones themselves were reduced to rubble? This is not merely a story about archaeology. It is an investigation into one of the oldest mysteries ever attached to a sacred place. And like all enduring mysteries, the first answer only leads to a deeper question. To understand why this mystery began, we must leave behind the ruins and return to the world that first gave them meaning. The landscape before us is not yet a city of stone monuments and competing empires. It is the rugged hill country of ancient Judah, a land of limestone ridges, narrow valleys, scattered olive groves, and winds carrying the dust of distant deserts. At the heart of this landscape rises a modest elevation known as Mount Moriah. Long before it became the focus of religious devotion, it was simply one hill among many. Yet in the memory of ancient Israel, this place acquired a significance unlike any other. According to biblical tradition, it was here that Abraham journeyed to offer Isaac. Centuries later, it would become the site chosen by King Solomon for the construction of the temple. The historical record suggests that by the 10th century BCE, Jerusalem was emerging as the political and religious center of a developing kingdom. The temple was not merely a place of worship. In the ancient Near East, temples were understood as meeting points between the human and divine realms. They were cosmic centers, sacred mountains built in stone, places where heaven and earth were believed to intersect. For the people of ancient Israel, the temple embodied that idea more completely than any structure before it. Within its courts, priests performed rituals prescribed by sacred law. Incense drifted upward through cedar beams and gilded chambers. Pilgrims arrived carrying offerings from distant settlements. Yet the temple's deepest mystery was hidden from ordinary eyes. At its center stood the Holy of Holies, a chamber so sacred that only the high priest could enter, and only on specific occasions. There, according to tradition, rested the Ark of the Covenant. Whether viewed as history, theology, or collective memory, one fact remains undeniable. The entire symbolic universe of ancient Israel revolved around this mountain. And if the mountain itself was considered sacred, a deeper question emerges. What did the ancient world believe existed beneath it? Now, for a moment, set aside the debates of historians and the measurements of archaeologists. Instead, imagine that the Temple of Solomon stands before you as it once existed in the imagination of the ancient world. The morning sun rises over the hills of Judah, and its first rays strike walls sheathed in gold. The light does not merely illuminate the structure, it seems to ignite it. From a distance, the temple appears less like a building and more like a mountain crowned with fire. White limestone reflects the brilliance of the sky, while polished bronze glimmers at the entrances like liquid sunlight frozen in place. Pilgrims ascending toward Jerusalem would have seen the sanctuary long before reaching its gates, a radiant landmark suspended between earth and heaven. Passing through its outer courts, the atmosphere changes. The sounds of the city begin to fade. The scent of burning incense mingles with cedar imported from Lebanon. Shadows stretch across massive stone pavements worn smooth by generations of worshippers. Every element appears deliberate. Every measurement carries symbolic meaning. Palm trees, pomegranates, cherubim, and sacred geometric patterns cover walls and furnishings, transforming architecture into theology carved in wood and stone. Yet the eye is inevitably drawn toward the innermost chamber. Beyond layers of gates and veils lies the Holy of Holies, hidden from ordinary sight. No windows break its darkness. No natural light enters its interior. Ancient tradition describes it as a place where the invisible presence of God dwelt among humanity. Two colossal cherubims spread their wings across the chamber like guardians of a forgotten threshold. Between them rested the Ark of the Covenant, a golden chest overshadowed by symbols of divine mystery. It is here that the imagery becomes almost dreamlike. A sacred mountain, a hidden chamber, a throne without a visible king. And beneath all of it, the bedrock of Mount Moriah itself. The deeper question emerges naturally from the image. If every visible stone of the temple carried symbolic meaning, should we assume that the ground beneath it was merely ordinary earth? Or did the ancient world see something far more profound hidden below the foundation of its holiest sanctuary? The mystery deepens when we examine what happened after the temple entered history. Sacred places rarely remain untouched by conflict, and few locations on earth have accumulated as many layers of competing claims as Mount Moriah. The first major rupture came in 586 BCE when the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem and destroyed Solomon's temple. The historical record confirms the destruction. What it does not clearly explain is what became of the temple's most sacred objects. The Ark of the Covenant, once described as the center of Israel's religious life, disappears from the historical narrative with startling abruptness. This silence created a vacuum, and throughout history, vacuums tend to attract theories. Some traditions claim that priests hid the ark before the Babylonian invasion. Others suggested it was carried away as plunder. A few later accounts proposed that it was transported to distant lands beyond Judah. The difficulty is that none of these explanations enjoys universal acceptance among historians. The strongest evidence confirms the temple's destruction, but the fate of its holiest treasure remains uncertain. The conflict did not end there. Centuries later, the Second Temple rose upon the same sacred ground. Yet an important theological question emerged. If the Ark was gone, could the new sanctuary possess the same holiness as the original? Some religious traditions answered yes. Others saw the absence of the Ark as a profound spiritual loss. Then came the Roman conquest, followed by Byzantine rule, followed by the rise of Islamic Jerusalem. Each civilization inherited the same mountain. Each attached new meanings to it. Each believed the site stood closer to the divine than ordinary ground. Yet these interpretations did not always agree. Was this the place where God dwelt among Israel? The site of Abraham's greatest test? The foundation stone of creation itself? The location of a heavenly ascent? The historical record preserves all of these voices. None entirely silences the others. And that raises a deeper question. If so many generations disagreed about what the mountain meant, how can we be certain about what may have been hidden beneath it? To move further into this investigation, we must leave the visible ruins behind and enter a different kind of landscape. The world preserved in ancient texts, fragmentary traditions, and memories carried across centuries. Some of the most intriguing clues connected to Solomon's temple do not come from archaeology at all. They come from writings that exist at the edges of the historical record. One example appears in later Jewish traditions preserved within rabbinic literature. Several passages suggest that before the Babylonian destruction, certain sacred objects may have been concealed in hidden chambers beneath the Temple Mount. The evidence here is complicated. These texts were written centuries after the events they describe, meaning they cannot be treated as eyewitness accounts. Yet they remain important because they reveal what later generations believed might have happened. Another fascinating tradition appears in the account known as the Treatise of the Vessels, a medieval text claiming that treasures from the temple were hidden in secret locations and protected until a future age. Most scholars regard this work as legendary rather than historical. Even so, its existence demonstrates how deeply the idea of concealed sacred objects had entered collective memory. Beyond Jewish sources, other traditions developed their own narratives. Some Ethiopian texts associated with the Ark of the Covenant describe its removal from Jerusalem altogether. According to these accounts, the Ark did not vanish beneath the temple, but was transported to another land. Supporters of this theory point to the persistence of these traditions across centuries. Others remain unconvinced, noting the lack of direct historical evidence connecting these claims to the First Temple period. The difficulty with all of these interpretations is that they attempt to explain the same silence. The historical record clearly shows that the Ark disappears. What follows is a mosaic of competing answers. Some are rooted in theology, some in folklore, some in genuine historical speculation. Yet none has achieved universal acceptance. And that raises a deeper question. If so many traditions emerge to explain what was hidden, are they preserving fragments of forgotten history, or revealing something about humanity's enduring discomfort with unanswered mysteries? At this point in the investigation, it becomes necessary to ask whether the greatest secrets of Solomon's temple were ever intended to be understood literally. Ancient civilizations often communicated profound ideas through architecture, ritual, and symbolism rather than direct explanation. The temple was not simply a building. It functioned as a symbolic map of the universe itself. The strongest evidence for this interpretation comes from the temple's design. Moving inward through its courts was not merely a physical journey. It represented a progression from the ordinary world towards sacred space. The outer courts belonged to the community. The sanctuary belonged to the priesthood. The Holy of Holies belonged to the divine presence alone. In theological terms, the structure created a hierarchy of holiness. In symbolic terms, it recreated the ancient vision of a cosmos ordered around a sacred center. This pattern appears far beyond Israel. Historians of religion have noted that many ancient cultures envisioned a central point where heaven, earth, and the underworld intersected. Scholars often refer to this concept as the axis mundi, the world axis. The Temple Mount appears to have fulfilled a similar role within the imagination of ancient Judaism. This may help explain the significance of the foundation stone. Later traditions described it as the point from which creation began and the place where primordial chaos was restrained beneath the ordered world. Archaeology cannot verify such claims. Yet archaeology does reveal that sacred sites across the ancient Near East were frequently built upon elevated bedrock, reinforcing their symbolic connection to stability, permanence, and cosmic order. The difficulty with interpreting these traditions literally is that they often function simultaneously on multiple levels. A stone can be a real stone. It can also be a theological statement. A hidden chamber can refer to an actual space beneath a building. It can also symbolize hidden wisdom, divine mystery, or the boundary between human knowledge and sacred knowledge. My reading of the evidence is that the enduring power of Solomon's temple lies precisely in this ambiguity. The symbols never fully reveal themselves. They invite investigation, reflection, and debate. And perhaps that is why the search beneath the temple continues long after the temple itself has vanished. Every enduring mystery eventually attracts interpretations that exist beyond the boundaries of mainstream scholarship. Some fade quickly. Others survive for centuries because they address questions that conventional explanations leave unresolved. The Temple of Solomon is no exception. Among the most controversial interpretations is the idea that the temple was constructed not merely as a place of worship, but as a repository of hidden knowledge inherited from an earlier age. Versions of this theory appear in medieval esoteric traditions, later mystical writings, and certain streams of speculative literature. According to these interpretations, the temple concealed sacred wisdom concerning creation, cosmic order, or divine realities accessible only to a select priestly elite. The appeal of this theory is easy to understand. The temple contained restricted spaces. Access was carefully controlled. Certain rituals were known only to specific individuals. Yet the historical evidence presents significant challenges. While ancient priesthoods undoubtedly preserved specialized religious knowledge, no surviving contemporary source explicitly describes a secret archive of forbidden wisdom hidden beneath the temple. Some scholars argue that later traditions may have projected their own fascination with hidden knowledge back onto an earlier period. Others remain unconvinced that the symbolism can be dismissed so easily. Another controversial interpretation concerns the foundation stone itself. Certain mystical traditions described it as a seal placed over the primordial abyss. In these accounts, the stone was not merely part of the landscape. It represented the boundary separating creation from chaos. The difficulty with this interpretation is that it emerges primarily from theological reflection rather than archaeological evidence. Yet scholars of comparative religion note that similar motifs appear throughout the ancient Near East, where sacred mountains and temple foundations often symbolize the victory of cosmic order over primordial disorder. A third and even more debated theory suggests that hidden chambers beneath the temple once contained objects or records deliberately removed from public memory. Supporters point to persistent traditions about concealed treasures. Critics note the absence of verifiable evidence. The archaeological record cannot currently confirm either position. What makes these interpretations fascinating is not whether they can be proven. It is the fact that generation after generation returned to the same possibility, that beneath the visible sanctuary lay another sanctuary, and beneath the public story lay another story waiting to be uncovered. Yet the debate remains open. At this stage of the investigation, we encounter a division that has shaped centuries of debate. The evidence itself has not changed dramatically. What changes is the way different scholars interpret that evidence. The first interpretation might be called the historical theory. According to this view, the mystery beneath Solomon's temple has gradually expanded beyond what the available evidence can support. Historians in this camp emphasize a simple observation. Ancient temples commonly contained storage areas, foundation structures, and restricted chambers. The existence of underground spaces beneath the Temple Mount would therefore not be surprising. From this perspective, later traditions about hidden treasures, secret archives, or concealed sacred objects emerged as attempts to explain historical gaps left by the destruction of the temple and the disappearance of the Ark. The strength of this interpretation lies in its reliance on documented evidence. The weakness is that it struggles to explain why remarkably persistent traditions continued to emerge across different centuries and cultures. A second interpretation approaches the problem differently. It does not assume that every tradition is historically accurate, but it argues that collective memory sometimes preserves fragments of forgotten realities. Scholars sympathetic to this view point out that multiple ancient sources refer to hidden chambers, concealed sacred objects, and restricted subterranean spaces. While none of these sources provides definitive proof, proponents argue that such consistency may reflect memories of genuine features once associated with the temple complex. The strength of this interpretation is its willingness to take ancient traditions seriously. Its weakness is that the archaeological record has not yet provided direct confirmation of its most dramatic claims. The difficulty is that both theories solve certain problems while creating others. One risks reducing centuries of tradition to legend. The other risks treating legend as history. The archaeological record cannot fully settle the dispute. The textual evidence remains incomplete. And so the investigation reaches a familiar crossroads. Are the stories beneath Solomon's temple echoes of something that was physically hidden, or are they the result of generations attempting to fill a silence that history never fully explained? For much of this investigation, we have been navigating through texts, traditions, and interpretations. But eventually, every historical inquiry reaches the same question: what does the physical evidence reveal? The challenge, in the case of Solomon's temple, is that the archaeological record remains unusually fragmented. Unlike many ancient sites, the area traditionally associated with the Temple Mount has been shaped by continuous construction, destruction, and religious activity for more than 2,000 years. Direct excavation beneath its most sensitive areas has been extremely limited, leaving many questions unresolved. Even so, archaeology has not been entirely silent. Across Jerusalem, excavations have uncovered monumental retaining walls, ritual installations, ancient stairways, and architectural remains connected to the broader temple complex of later periods. These discoveries confirm the extraordinary religious importance of the site, even when they cannot directly verify traditions associated with Solomon's original sanctuary. Some scholars point to subterranean structures, cisterns, tunnels, and chambers documented beneath portions of the Temple Mount. Their existence is not disputed. The debate concerns their purpose, age, and relationship to earlier phases of the site. The archaeological record confirms underground spaces. It does not yet confirm the more dramatic claims attached to them. Beyond Jerusalem itself, echoes of the temple appear in other forms. Ancient inscriptions, biblical manuscripts, and later historical accounts preserve memories of sacred objects once associated with the sanctuary. The writings of Josephus provide valuable descriptions of the Second Temple period, while discoveries such as the Dead Sea Scrolls reveal how deeply temple symbolism shaped religious thought in ancient Judaism. Yet none of these sources offers definitive proof regarding hidden chambers or lost treasures beneath the original temple. What archaeology often provides is not direct confirmation, but cultural context. Similar patterns appear throughout the ancient Near East. Sacred complexes were frequently built above natural bedrock, caves, or subterranean features that acquired symbolic significance over time. Whether this reflects historical reality or the accumulation of sacred memory remains debated. The evidence suggests continuity of reverence. The mystery lies in determining how much of that reverence preserves forgotten history, and how much reflects humanity's tendency to transform sacred places into landscapes of enduring legend. To understand why the mystery beneath Solomon's temple became so powerful, we must step into the theological imagination of the ancient world. Modern readers often think of temples as places where people gathered to worship. Ancient peoples understood them differently. A temple was not simply a location dedicated to a deity. It was believed to be the place where the divine presence intersected with the human world. In the worldview of ancient Israel, the temple represented the ordered center of creation itself. This idea appears repeatedly throughout the symbolism associated with the sanctuary. The Holy of Holies stood at the center of the temple. The temple stood at the center of Jerusalem. Jerusalem stood at the center of the covenant people. The structure reflected a theological pattern moving from the ordinary toward the sacred, from the visible toward the invisible. Some scholars argue that the temple functioned as a symbolic recreation of creation itself. The decorative imagery of palm trees, flowers, cherubim, and precious metals may have echoed themes associated with Eden, suggesting that the sanctuary represented a restored meeting place between God and humanity. Others remain cautious about pushing this interpretation too far, noting that symbolism can be difficult to reconstruct with certainty. Yet the broader pattern remains compelling. Ancient religious thought frequently imagined the cosmos as ordered around a sacred center. Within this framework, Mount Moriah was not merely geography. It was sacred geography. The foundation stone, later associated with the Temple Mount, illustrates this perspective. In certain Jewish traditions, it became the point from which creation began. Theological significance here does not depend upon whether the claim can be archaeologically verified. Its importance lies in what it reveals about ancient thought. The world was not perceived as random. It was believed to possess a center, a point where divine order entered history. This raises a deeper question. If the temple symbolized the center of creation, then what did the hidden spaces beneath it represent? Were they simply foundations supporting a building, or did they embody something equally important in the religious imagination? The boundary between the ordered world above and the primordial mystery that lay beneath it. As our investigation approaches its deepest layer, the mystery beneath Solomon's temple begins to reveal itself as something larger than archaeology, larger than history, and perhaps even larger than theology alone. Beneath every question about hidden chambers, lost relics, and vanished treasures lies another question that ancient people repeatedly confronted. How much of reality can human beings truly know? The civilizations of the ancient world lived under a sky filled with signs they could not fully explain and within a landscape marked by forces they could not fully control. Storms arrived without warning. Kingdoms rose and collapsed. Death remained undefeated. In such a world, the desire to locate a sacred center was more than a religious instinct. It was an attempt to impose meaning upon uncertainty. The temple represented one answer to that longing. It offered the possibility that beneath the apparent chaos of existence there existed a deeper order. Yet the architecture itself contained an important paradox. The closer one moved toward the divine center, the less one could see. The Holy of Holies was hidden behind veils. Access became increasingly restricted. The ultimate mystery was not revealed through greater visibility, but through greater concealment. This pattern appears throughout ancient religious thought. Wisdom was often associated not with possessing all answers, but with recognizing the limits of human understanding. The disappearance of the ark intensifies this paradox. Had it remained visible, it might have become merely another historical artifact. Instead, its absence transformed it into a symbol of something forever sought, yet never fully possessed. Some scholars interpret this as a consequence of historical loss. Others see a deeper symbolic pattern emerging from the tradition itself. The evidence cannot fully resolve the question. What it reveals is the recurring tension between knowledge and mystery. Ancient people did not merely seek information about the divine. They sought orientation within a universe that often appeared vast, hidden, and incomprehensible. Perhaps that is why the mystery beneath the temple continues to resonate. Not because it promises certainty, but because it confronts one of the oldest realities of human existence. The farther we travel toward ultimate truth, the more aware we become of the boundaries of our own understanding. After examining the historical record, the archaeological evidence, the ancient texts, the symbolic traditions, and the competing interpretations, we arrive at the point where every serious investigation must ask a final question. What is the strongest conclusion the evidence allows us to reach? The historical record establishes that a temple once stood upon this mountain. Archaeological evidence confirms the extraordinary sacred significance of the site across many centuries. Ancient texts preserve memories of holy objects, restricted spaces, and traditions surrounding hidden chambers. Yet when we attempt to move beyond these foundations and identify exactly what lies beneath Solomon's temple, certainty begins to dissolve. The archaeological record remains incomplete. The textual traditions often emerge centuries after the events they describe. Many of the most dramatic claims cannot currently be verified. This does not mean they are false. It means they remain unresolved. Yet something remarkable emerges when these layers are viewed together. Throughout our investigation, one pattern has appeared repeatedly. The temple was never understood merely as a building. It functioned as a symbol of a sacred center, a point where heaven, earth, history, memory, and divine order converged. The hidden spaces beneath it therefore acquired significance not only because they might contain physical objects, but because they represented access to deeper realities concealed beneath the visible world. My reading of the evidence is that the enduring power of this mystery lies precisely in that intersection between history and meaning. Some seekers searched for lost treasures. Others searched for sacred knowledge. Others sought confirmation that the universe possessed an underlying order. The temple became a vessel capable of carrying all of these hopes simultaneously. This interpretation does not solve every historical question. The debate remains open. The fate of the ark remains uncertain. The purpose of every subterranean structure remains unknown. Yet the strongest evidence suggests that the true significance of what lies beneath Solomon's temple may never have depended entirely on what was physically hidden there. The deeper revelation may be that ancient civilizations repeatedly returned to this mountain because they believed it marked the place where visible reality ended and ultimate meaning began. And perhaps that belief itself became the greatest treasure preserved beneath the ruins. As the final stones of this investigation settle into place, the mystery itself remains. The mountain is still there. The foundations are still there. Somewhere beneath layers of earth, history, memory, and faith, countless questions continue to wait in silence. We began this journey searching for what might be hidden beneath Solomon's temple. Along the way, we encountered lost objects, disputed traditions, sacred architecture, ancient texts, and competing interpretations that spanned nearly 3,000 years. Some questions led to evidence. Others led only to possibilities. Yet perhaps that is precisely what makes this mystery endure. The archaeological record can reveal walls, chambers, and foundations. Ancient manuscripts can preserve memories and beliefs. Historical analysis can weigh probabilities and challenge assumptions. But there comes a point where every investigation reaches the edge of what can be known. Beyond that edge lies a territory occupied not by certainty, but by wonder. The ancient builders who stood upon Mount Moriah may have believed they were constructing more than a sanctuary. They may have believed they were marking a place where the visible world touched something greater than itself. Whether that belief reflected historical reality, theological imagination, or a combination of both remains a subject of ongoing debate. Yet the question survives because it speaks to something deeper than the fate of a lost relic. If future discoveries were to prove that no hidden treasure exists beneath the Temple Mount, would the mystery truly disappear? Or would humanity simply continue searching for another sacred center, another hidden chamber, another place where the boundary between history and meaning appears thin enough to cross? Perhaps that is the question that still lingers beneath the stones. Before we leave this ancient mountain behind, I would like to thank everyone who joined this investigation. The purpose of Forgotten Scriptures has never been to deliver final answers, but to explore difficult questions with intellectual honesty and curiosity. If you are a historian, archaeologist, theologian, researcher, or simply a thoughtful observer, your perspective is part of this conversation. And as this chapter closes, the debate remains open, waiting for the next piece of evidence, the next forgotten text, or perhaps the next question that history has not yet finished asking.